So I'm Amy Mercer, founder of Uplift Us, formerly Uplift Her. I'm really excited about the talk that we have today. Everyone's talking about it, and it's probably the biggest buzzword of the decade. And it's likely that if you're using any form of technology, it's already built into it, and that is AI. Today, I'm joined by a former colleague of mine, Jon Fletcher. Jon and I used to work together at Technicolor, and he's now the Chief AI Strategist and founder and chair of the AI Learning Collective. Welcome, Jon.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I'm going to dive right into it because, like we said, AI is a big buzzword at the moment. Can you help us by starting with some of the basics? Because there's
Of
a
course.
lot of words flying around: AI, generative AI, machine learning, those sorts of things.
Yeah, of course. AI is a big buzzword. It's being plastered across every marketing, every social channel, every possible supplier pack that you receive from prospective suppliers. AI has been around for over 30 years. It's not anything new. It's not a new piece of technology. AI fundamentally is a technology. But there's been a little bit of a smoke and mirrors type approach to it, because what we mean by AI is we actually mean something called generative AI or Gen AI. And Gen AI is a subset of a subset of a subset of a piece of technology that
Any more
underpins
subsets?
AI. So in artificial intelligence, you've got something called machine learning. Within machine learning, you've got something called deep learning. And with deep learning is essentially being able to take and learn from data, which is where you might hear the phrase large language models, for example, sits within that deep learning sphere. And then within that, you've got generative AI. And it essentially generates new content using mathematical calculations of percentages and creates that content for the question that you put into it. November 22 happened with ChatGPT being launched by OpenAI.
Yeah.
And that's when the world got access to a piece of technology which they never had access to before. The reality is that piece of technology had been going since 2016 with different iterations of ChatGPT. I think it was 1, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.54, and so forth. And it's being brought into every single part of our world and our lives at the moment, right from organizations trying to work out how to utilize it and use it, through to it being within our personal lives. Mobile phones are now having it on iPads, computers are going to have it built in. And essentially what the essence of it is for all of us is it enables us to do stuff that we didn't particularly like to do before a lot easier and a lot quicker. It drives efficiency gains, it drives productivity gains, it drives our creative mindset. If you're not very creative in mindset in the first place, it gives you ideas to do brainstorming. You can do regeneration of text. It can do a lot of good things, but it's also a little bit clumsy. It's doesn't necessarily get everything right in what it creates. It's not 100% accurate in what it does or what it produces. And so whilst we have this great piece of technology that is fundamentally changing organizations and the way the organizations operate and work and will continue to evolve over time, there's also elements of it which get stuff wrong, gets outputs wrong. And that's why, there's still the real requirement for us humans to be involved. Even though it's a technology, we still need to be guiding and leading on that technology.
So obviously you've kind of said that it's been around for a while and it's kind of now in every part of our lives, and there's some real positives about that as well. Like you said, that it makes some stuff really easy. There's some leading research that's been done from a medical perspective, but there's also quite a lot of fear around it as well. Fear from a job perspective, like you said, it's taking away some of the tasks that we maybe didn't like to do, or we or sometimes it takes, especially when you're thinking about huge amounts of data and trying to analyze and understand that data. But what do you think some of the common misconceptions are about AI?
Yeah,
you've kind of come across, and I suppose how do you address some of them as well?
So the first misconception that AI is going to take over my job.
Mm.
We are a long, long way from job taking. In order for that to happen, automation really needs to be embedded well within the organization, because there's two states when you look at AI. There's augmentation, i.e., how do I augment my flow of work? And then there's automation. How do I automate my flow of work? Um, at the moment, around 50 to 60% of automation projects that happen in organizations fail because either lack of adoption or because of poor use case that underpins it. So the fear of losing your job, or the fear that if I go and play with this technology within my organization, it's going to take over my job, is one that is real. And I see it day in, day out in organizations and in the conversations that I have. But the reality is we are really, really far away from that, because it requires there to be a human element to it. It still requires, the technology to get to a point where it understands right from wrong, and then can make a calculated decision if it needs to be in the middle. If it's not quite right, but it's not quite wrong, but a decision needs to be made, it can only say yes or no at the moment. It can't say, well, it can go either way, and based on everything, we can go down that direction. So we're not anywhere near the point of it replacing people's jobs. However, it will augment those jobs. It will evolve, and it will enable the individuals to become higher performers within the jobs, within their roles. It will enable them to do and focus on the more strategic and important parts of their roles, and not so much the administrative tasks, for example. So I think that's the first big misconception out there, that it's going to come and take my job and my role. At the moment, we are really, really far away from that. I think the second one, which I'm seeing a lot, is there's a lot of social content out there which talks about being able to go and generate an AI business in 10 minutes and become a millionaire in 2 months. That is a load of rubbish. I've been trying a lot of them. They don't work. The reality is it's really hard to do that, and you've got to know the right technology. Secondly, you've got to be the 1 in 1 million person that gets and cuts through the noise, gets the right marketing, gets the right advertisement,
Yeah.
and you're able to do that. And that's the same when you look at YouTube channels, saying, oh, it's really easy to go and build a YouTube channel with X number of followers. Well, it's not that easy to do, actually. It's not that simple. And so this notion that you can then use AI to try and drive a second commercial revenue is actually really, really difficult, and not necessarily as easy as social channels make out to it. So that would probably be the second myth, would be don't listen to everything you hear on social. Comes with it. And I think the final one is probably a lot of the conversations I have. It goes, yeah, but it's just a technology. It's not really going to be here to stay that long. It's like another fad. It's another, it's another something that will come along and then in 2 years' time will go away. That's
Yeah,
not
it
the
definitely
case.
feels like it's here
Yeah,
to stay, doesn't it? It's embedded in so much of what we're already
yeah.
using.
I mean, Microsoft are spending billions. Google are spending billions. Recently, Apple announced their launch of Apple Intelligence, and spending billions on it. It's not going away, and it is going to be here to stay. And I think we need, as individuals and as a collective, come together to be able to utilize and use this technology in the right way, in a responsible way, in an ethical way, to deliver what it's there to be able to support in delivering: increased productivity, increase efficiencies, reduction in risk management, for example. Whatever it is that you want to try to achieve with it, is to do it in the right ways.
Mm. The point you said about like augmenting roles,
Mm.
and I suppose thinking much like more broadly about skills, like you and I, when we worked together, spent a huge amount of time looking at skills within a particular industry. And one of the things that I think as these tasks and roles kind of get augmented is that actually the skills that are going to be much more needed in organizations effectively become more human. Like we now need to start to elevate the interpersonal skills, the things that actually machines and technology aren't going to be able to do. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. AI doesn't. I've had this conversation a lot. AI doesn't impact the skill. AI impacts the task that you do.
Mm,
And in
that's a
order
good
to
way of
understand,
thinking about it. Yeah.
and in order to understand what skills you need to develop, you need to understand what tasks are going to be impacted or evolved because of AI. Um, if we look at it from a communications perspective, as a skill, sometimes you might get communicating with impact skill, but it's actually I'm now going to be able to write um, my senior weekly email to the senior leadership team more effectively and be more concise in what I'm saying
Mm,
and be more impactful with what I'm saying because of AI. That's the task that is being impacted because of AI, not the communicating with impact skill. That naturally evolves over time once you understand how to evolve the task that you're doing. And I think the task is a mixture of technology skill set, i.e., how do I use this technology to maximize?
yeah.
But you're absolutely right. More importantly, is the human-centered skills or human-centric skills, which are becoming even more important. The two biggest skills to go and learn. If somebody said, "What are the two things I need to go and do?" One is to focus on fact checking and understanding how to fact check really effectively when it comes to AI. And it's critical thinking. Should I actually be using AI for this task? What is the requirement for me to use this tool in order for me to deliver this task?
Mm,
And the human centered skills are becoming hugely important. And also, there's the cultural and ethical centered skills, which are also starting to come from the forefront. So, we might utilize a chatbot, or sorry, we might utilize a chat GPT, for example, to create text. Actually, is that text that's now being generated culturally sensitive to support the audience? Is it ethically appropriate? Is the image that I've created ethically appropriate? What does that actually mean for me and my audience? And I think these skills, which we've probably skirted around the edge of, being very honest in organizations, there might be one or two modules and courses that you do as part of your mandated training are actually going to become really, really important to really dive into and actually understand what does it mean and what's the implication or the impact of what I'm reading or seeing. How do I think about this in a different perspective, in a really different lens? And these are skills which I've been out there for quite some time, but skills we've never really had to develop because we haven't had to, but we are now because AI is changing the tasks which we are doing, and we're going to need to evolve those skills to support those tasks.
Yeah. It's also like what you're saying is it's almost like context setting becomes like a huge like skill in the
Mm.
future, being able to understand if that is an appropriate thing to use. Does it reflect like the community, the organization, whatever you're working within? That actually becomes like quite a heightened human skill that isn't going to be necessarily
Yeah.
by it's almost something that is going to we're probably seeing the increase as
Yeah,
well.
and I think where in our existing system, if we go to a technology perspective, in our existing systems that we've often used, an LMS, an ATS system, a
Mm,
HCM platform, it's been very agnostic towards cultural, ethical
yeah.
sensitivities. When it comes to something that's generating content and potentially generating a response back to an employee, if you're working in a global organization, you need to be really mindful and understanding of the data that solution's been trained on, or the bias mitigation that's been put in place to support it, because you could have a situation where you review the solution, it gives you a response, and you look at that response based on a middle-aged white male based in the UK, and I go, yeah, that's a really good response.
Mm,
I then push that out as a solution, and then I get a phone call from or a message from somebody in the Middle East and says the responses it's given me are really culturally inappropriate for our
mm,
region because of our religious beliefs, because of our society. I've looked at it and gone, yeah, it looks great, but I've not actually done or understood the cultural sensitivities where these solutions are being in. and I have no control over what's being created because
Yeah.
it's still the individual that's putting the prompt in order to be able to do it. And so all of these new skills are we have to go and absorb and understand, and sometimes have some of the difficult conversations that we had when the Black Lives Matter movement
Mm.
occurred. Some really difficult conversations I had for me to understand what that truly meant, and we're going to probably have to have these type of conversations moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like understanding the complexities of like the way that society and social kind of influences work. That's not necessarily something that is, well, that's
No,
almost going to be heightened even more.
yeah,
Um, when we think about literacy, though, because like we
mm,
said, we're already seeing it in technology that we probably don't even know that we're using half of the time, and it's already embedded in that. How do you kind of see HR the AI and literacy kind of changing careers in the future? Like the
yeah.
need for more literacy.
I think if we went, so there's something called AI literacy. AI literacy is the overarching skill that underpins a basic understanding of what AI is. So it includes the fundamentals of AI. What do we mean by machine learning, deep learning, general um, or generative AI? What do we mean by large language models and so forth? There's then ethical considerations is a big part of that, and included within ethical is environmental impacts, because AI is a very hungry horse when it comes to energy, and at the moment there's a lot of work being done on how we can drive greener data centers, making sure the architecture that the models are built upon is greener, um, but it's still very energy efficient, energy hungry. Um, the other elements are critical thinking and fact checking, as I mentioned before, and then within that is the organizational context or the situational context. So if you are deploying this within your organization, what is my organization doing? What are the policies that my organization have created, or how have they adapted existing policies to support this new technology coming through? A lot of organizations are just going to launch Copilot without any training to support their teams. So all of a sudden, you've got a technology which is quite revolutionary in what people's perceptions is of it, being put into hands of individuals that do not know how to use it. They don't know how to engage with it properly, and then they're wondering why adoption's kind of really low, because the reality is the literacy is not there to support individuals in utilizing the technology in an effective and engaging way. And I see a number of things happening within the organization. Organizations aren't built to truly harness AI as a technology, and I talk about AI in the wider context, not just
Mhm.
generative AI, but you've got discriminative AI, you've got predictive AI, there's other solutions out there. Um, Organizations aren't built for that. And so we need to redesign how our organizations operate and work, really putting the employee, their careers, their performance at the heart of and the utilization of technology at the heart of our strategy and direction. A lot of organizations are starting to talk about AI as a point of differentiation. It only becomes a point of differentiation if people can use it effectively, either as a solution which is being sold into organizations or internally in order to drive improved customer experience.
Mm.
And so organizations aren't set up correctly, which means from a HR people perspective, from our kind of world, we are really trying to pin together certain things. What does it mean for us as individuals? That's predominantly where the conversation is at the moment.
Yeah.
Some leaders are going, okay, what's this mean for my wider function? What does it mean for HR or L&D or talent acquisition? And very few are actually then thinking, how do we drive adoption of this technology within the organization? How do I enable my employees that I'm here to support to drive it? And so I think what we're going to start to see is a change in the way that HR thinks about things. I think at the moment it's quite scattergun. They're not too sure. They're not sure what value that AI is bringing to them. I read
Mm.
one report recently from one of the top four consultancy that said HR is the number one place where organizations are going to look at cost efficiency. well, if they're looking at cost efficiency in HR, what do we need to do as HR and as people leaders to be able to get ourselves into a position where we're not seen as just a cost center and they're going to try and
Yeah.
wipe out a load of costs? How are we actually adding value? And for me, that's where the adoption side of it comes in. And I think finally, I would probably say that the technology itself is agnostic to a department. When we think about content creation, it's the number one use case. Content creation can sit across any department. It doesn't matter whether you're creating L&D training courses, whether you're creating policies, people's job roles, contracts, whether you're trying to respond to a litigation within a legal department. It doesn't matter. It comes down to how the solution that is generating that content is being contexted by the organization or by the individual who has the experience and the knowledge to be able to context it. And so I think you're going to start to see, instead of there being vertical teams, I think you'll start to see more horizontal organizational teams coming into play.
Yeah, where you kind of need disparate kind of groups of people to kind of come together and think about things from a different aspect. But your point that you've said about adoption is an age-old issue, isn't it? I mean, I think between us, we've seen lots of pieces of technology that have been introduced, and actually really adding this layer of a different form of technology on top actually, in fact, makes things much more complicated. So it doesn't actually easy, it doesn't take jobs away, it doesn't like kind of do that sort of stuff. It actually becomes much, as you were saying, much more complex, um, and quite costly for probably an organization and individual. So it feels like we're in that fear bubble at the moment about what's happening, but nobody has really figured out how and when and where to use the technology. And I think that is a really important piece, is the whole context of what do you plan on it doing, and how does this change the way that we maybe work, or maybe also what we work on as well.
It's exactly that. I spent 3.5 years researching AI back at the end of 2019, and it wasn't until the latter part of last year where I stopped trying to fit AI into what we already do and started to redesign what we
Yeah,
do in order to utilize AI. And I think organizations that will win will be the ones that will redesign themselves very quickly to be able to utilize the power of AI, the power of the technology, and not try to continue to drive or to continue to use technology and use what we currently got and try to build AI in as another solution, because you're absolutely right. It will
it's like
just
a
fall
bolt on.
over.
Like we need to think about it as a whole,
Yeah.
like piece.
And I think the other thing to be mindful of is that as you do start to explore this technology, as you start to try to drive adoption, there will be a increase in procrastination, an increase in poor utilization, i.e., I'm not utilizing it very effectively. The
Hmm.
time to do tasks will increase. So you might have an experienced member of staff saying, look, I can do this in 15 minutes. And we're like, yeah, but if you use AI, you'll be able to do it in 5 minutes and it will free you up to do more creative or more strategic things. But the reality is whilst they're going through that adoption cycle right at the start, it might take them 25, 30 minutes. So there needs to be an understanding that everybody will be adopting this at different speeds, and you will
Yeah,
see an increase in the ability to be able to adopt it against, if your time was an important parameter, it'll take longer for them to do the task until they become good at it, until it becomes embedded and adopted, and that's when you'll then start to see the gains out of it. So
yeah,
we're not even seeing in some organizations as a true realization of it. It's only now that I'm starting to hear the realization of any AI activity that started last year in
yeah.
organizations.
I think that's a really good point. It's like any form of transformation that an organization goes through, you always have to account for the efficiency gains that you
Mm,
get are actually going to be much further along, because actually the change in workflow, the change in people, the change in understanding what you're trying to do, like
mm,
it does get more complex for a while before you can kind of see. So it kind of almost has, you have to think about it as a bit more of an investment. And maybe that's how we should think about it as individuals and as companies, that AI is something that we need to invest in terms of to get the upside from it from our personal standpoint, but also as
Yeah.
organizations, you're not going to get that realization straight away. Um, but if as from an individual standpoint, what advice would you give to somebody that wants to like enhance their AI literacy, but
Yeah.
kind of doesn't know where to start?
First off, there's loads of different great courses out there. LinkedIn Learning have got some. Google have got free courses. Microsoft have got free courses. The Alan Turing Institute have got some free courses. So there's Udacity, Pluralsight, DataCamp. They've all got free courses around what is generative AI, how do you do generative AI.
Mm.
Having a good baseline understanding of what it is really important because it starts to break down the fear barrier as you start to explore it. The second element, or the second part of the journey, is to stop focusing on it and trying to drive a technology first approach. Because I think what we've done is we've gone off and this was systematic when ChatGPT got launched. We all went off and got hold of the technology and then tried to work out how to use that technology
Yeah.
instead of just saying, well, what is it in my process or my flow of work can I use to augment or use AI to augment that flow? So I'm heavily dyslexic, and I took probably about 2 weeks to write an article for LinkedIn. And I had a very clear process. I would first of all just do a brain dump everything down. I'd then do some research to make sure what I was initially talking about was right. I would then go through a review process of what I'd written and change it all because it would all be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd probably do that about 5 times because until I got to a point of, okay, I think this makes sense. I'd then
Get
pass it
somebody
across
else to
to,
read it as
yeah,
well.
somebody else. My dad would then read it and then come back with a load of suggestions. I'd then be procrastinating about it for a while, thinking it's not quite good enough, and then eventually launch it.
Yeah.
The reality is, what I now do is I still jot everything down the way I want to talk about it, and I'll still do that research piece, but it happens a lot quicker because
Mm.
I'm talking about a topic that I'm more passionate about and I've done a lot of research into. What I've then done is I then use all AI or generative AI like ChatGPT to start augmenting what I'm saying. So analyzing what I'm saying in a way that doesn't lose its tonality, doesn't lose its purpose, and write it in a way that a reader would understand it or interpret it a lot more clearer. I use smart brevity principles quite a lot when I do this. So I ask to actually, can I say this paragraph in lesser words and still deliver the same purpose?
Mm.
So I ask it to use its smart brevity principles. Um, and subsequently, all of the spelling's correct, all of the grammar's correct, and overall, it's a lot quicker. So instead of it taking sort of 2.5 weeks, I actually only take kind of half a day now in order to get a really good article that I think is going to add value to the readers. And actually, they can read it and actually understand it. And it's not just half of it's a load of gobbledygook with 35 spelling mistakes that I actually pick up the moment I launch it. That's
Yes,
all gone.
that's like you and
Yeah.
I are both dyslexic, so we've had these conversations
Yeah.
before, and it was kind of going to be one of my questions about because we're both neurodivergent,
Yeah.
how you kind of see AI helping
It's.
people like us in the workplace, and I think it is one of those things. I think there is a real upside
Mm,
because there are huge skills that people have from a neurodivergent perspective, but essentially some of the like you just talked about, the processes tend to be more complex for us.
mm,
There's lots more checking, and there's also a lot more reliance on, like you said, you go ask your dad, ask anybody to read the thing, like
mm,
kind of before you have to. And there is also, I think, anxiety, particularly when I do stuff that surrounds when I am writing things,
mm,
that actually, I don't know how you feel, but there's a level of reassurance, like you said. There is not only that you can keep things in a tonality perspective, and it can check like kind of the sentences and the structure and like kind of the grammar, but there's a bit of like a surety as well
mm,
that you've got somebody check. So the work is still your own. You still have to have the ideas and the concept and the like kind of the thing that you have researched and understood, but it's you're using it there to help you construct things in a far quicker way.
Yeah. I think for me, understanding the process that I go through, and that's the second part that we obviously briefly talked about, I think is
Mm.
vitally important in order to you to understand what and how you bring AI into that flow of work. And it's done wonders for me. My confidence has shot up when I now write. I'm now critically, well, I'm fact checking the solution, AI, what AI is creating. I'm then fact checking myself against the AI. I'm actually
Right.
beating the AI scripting, i.e., what it's writing, knowing that it's not the way that somebody talks sometimes. So, for example, when it first came through, all we heard was is the realm of L&D, or the realm of HR was a
Yeah.
term that was being used. There's no right-minded person that uses that word in a business context, the realm of L&D. And you pick up on these nuances and these different things, and it gives you confidence, it gives you satisfaction and belief that you do know what you're talking about, and you do know that what you've created is going to be helpful, and you know that it's going to be right and accurate, and it 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 enables me to learn from it all as well. So it's not only is it helping
Mm.
me write the content itself, but it's also, I'm going through it and I'm learning new things as I'm going through it. So my fact checking ability is massively improved since. My ability to be able to review something from a different lens, like a cultural lens, has massively improved, because some of the stuff it originally produced was, even I was like, something doesn't feel right. Why doesn't this feel right? Let's explore that. So for me, yeah, I've my confidence, my feeling of
Yeah.
self worth has massively increased, and I'm not now scared to put something out on the internet thinking that there's going to be spelling mistakes in there, or
Yeah.
getting that guilty feeling when somebody drops you a private message saying, "Hi John, just seen this," and there's a big spelling mistake in there, and it is a
Horrible.
blatant spelling mistake.
Yeah.
I loved the feedback, but deep down it killed me, because I was just like, ah.
Absolutely.
And I think if
Time
you
and
go
time
into
again.
yeah, and I think if you go into the organizational context of it, people with you know, they might have ADHD, they might have dyslexia, they might have troubles focusing on things, I think will be hugely beneficial for the utilization of AI in their flow of work, provided they know how to do it and the
Mm.
benefits that it's driving, not just here you go and use it. Um, I was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and so for me, it helps me now understand how I operate and how my brain works.
Mm.
Where beforehand, I might have got up for a coffee, gone outside, and before I'd even realised that I wasn't working, I'd be sat outside with a cup of coffee because my brain had gone off somewhere that I didn't
Yeah.
even realise it had gone off. And then I go back to work, where now I'm able to actually focus on things a lot more specifically and clearly in what I'm doing, because I'm able to set reminders and timers, and I'm able to structure and coordinate things better with AI supporting and helping me in doing
Mm.
that. So before, it's taken me 45 minutes to respond to an email, it's taken me 5 minutes, which means that I'm actually enabling to get my work done within that time frame. Yes, I still get up sometimes and don't realize I've suddenly realized I've got my chair. I'm like, what am I doing? I need to carry on. But nonetheless, it's
Some heroes
enabling
have
me
a
to continue
brain.
to deliver and meet targets and everything. So as long as
Yeah.
people know how to use it in an effective way, I think it'll be really, really powerful.
Yeah. And like you said, I think that bit that you're saying, the space where we used to spend so much time, like you said, writing, trying to get to the point, all of those things. Actually, that has allowed you to
Mm.
develop other skills because, like you said, you're going off and checking or looking at things from a different cultural perspective. When we were doing things like that beforehand, you probably didn't have the capacity to do that as
Yeah,
well as have anxiety around just writing the thing,
yeah,
like kind of in the first
it
place.
absolutely.
It's given you more freedom if you want
yeah.
to use the tech.
I mean, I can still remember a time where we spent 2 weeks building job roles, um, speaking with loads of different people across I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, and we got all the different job
Mm.
roles across
Yeah.
the organization. If I had a co pilot sat next to me, I could have focused on delving into some of the questions and answers to actually understand what they were doing, the task they were doing, it knowing that my co-pilot would pick it up and then put it into the format that I want. Instead of me trying to make sure that I'm writing down what they're telling me in order to be able to do it would have just enabled the conversation to be a lot more exploratory, a lot more informative, and deliver probably a better outcome and response. I mean, what we did was so blimmin' brilliant, but I think it would have enabled us to be that kind of uber individuals in that moment of time. And I think it's about utilizing the technologies in different ways, and thinking about how you can use it in different ways in your role, not just taking it as face value of, okay, well, I can only do this on it, or I can only do that on it. It's actually saying, well, no, I can do loads of different things with the same piece of technology.
Definitely. Briefly, I want to come back to, because one thing that you've spoken about is ethical kind of considerations. And I suppose you actually put a post out that I was quite shocked by, because I didn't realise the amount of energy that is used when on a simple like question in ChatGPT. Talk to me more a little bit about like kind of ethical
Yeah.
considerations and what I suppose what we should be looking at from a company, but also like an individual basis as well.
So yeah, AI, as I mentioned, is highly inefficient when it comes to energy. To do a single prompt in a chat bot can take up to half a litre of water to call the servers that are being used to run that. If you think about ChatGPT, I think have over 1.5 billion questions every month. I think it is now, or something like that.
That's crazy.
That's a lot of water that's needed to be cooled down. So what's then happening is that this cold water that's going into these server farms is coming out warm. It's then affecting the local ecology. So you're starting to see rivers with green algae on the top of it because it's got warm water in an environment. Google at the moment use between 10 to 15% of their total energy usage on AI. Microsoft must be higher than that because everything they do pretty much now is conducive to their Copilot and their Azure AI services and solutions. To create a single image is the same as you running your fridge for 30 minutes on electricity. But there are positives. There are new greener data centers going to be coming online. There are going to be different ways you can architect the technology that underpins it for it to become more efficient. There are going to be something called on-edge computing power. Apple announced it as being on the iPhone and on their MacBooks. So instead of it needing to go off to a server, it's your computer power that essentially will drive the response to your questions. That will be very beneficial from an energy and saving perspective.
Yeah.
As individuals, though, we need to be very mindful about the ethical elements. So, for example, there was a report that was done that highlighted the underlying model that ChatGPT runs on was curated by individuals based out in Kenya for $2 a day, and they had to go in and tag graphical content. And at the time, there was no support for them. There was no mental health or well-being support for them. They outsourced it, and the outsourced company used individuals in Kenya to go through graphic content.
Wow.
Now, does it stop you using ChatGPT? Probably not. But we need to be making better informed decisions about the technologies that we're using. Even as simple as some of the suppliers that we might be working with in our organization. What are they doing for bias mitigation? What are they doing to try and drive their energy costs or the energy usage down of the AI that they've now decided to put into their systems? So there's a number of different things that are happening. There's a number of different opportunities and that we can look at and individually and go, well, you might not necessarily use your AI chatbot or your solution that you might be using on a day-to-day basis as much because of the impact to the environment. Likewise, there's a lot of positive elements being done around driving a more greener utilization of energy from an AI perspective, which is great. From an organizational perspective, if you've got a net zero target, you need to be mindful if you start running up large language models or contextually driving organization, what impact does that have? And what do you need to kind of consider and ask those questions? And then it's just making sure the other side of it is that when we are looking at using AI and you want to bring AI into the organization or into your flow of work as an individual, that you're not trying to do and use AI for bad. You're not trying to automate the whole world or the whole job of somebody to try and remove that individual and then not spend any time supporting them in upskilling them into a different
Yeah.
role or a different solution. So there's a human side to it that we obviously need to consider.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I think some of those stats that you shared are like unbelievable. I feel like we all should be maybe asking loads more questions, like kind of than just
Yeah.
taking things at surface level. And I think that's in the use of AI, but it's also in the output of it as well. Um, as we leave today's session, I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel like I've learned a lot, but like I said, I feel like I have a load more other questions. If you were to leave us with some practical tips in terms of being more AI ready or readiness, what would they be?
Go and explore, go and read from different people, from different sources. Go and complete some training if you've not done so. So Microsoft, LinkedIn, Google all have some great training out there as a baseline standard. They're all free. You don't need to pay for that. Start small. Identify a process that you want to go and augment, and then write that process down and work out how you can then augment that process with AI. It might be as simple as reviewing a document. It might be as simple as brainstorming for new ideas. And then continue to use that technology in that flow of work on a constant basis, become used to using that technology. And then as you start to become more experienced and you start to understand it a little bit more, start to look at other processes that you can start try to augment as well. Um, if you're in the organization, go and ask the questions in the organization. What is the organization doing? How are they supporting their employees? Is there training available? What's their AI strategy? What's their
Mm,
ethical strategy for AI? And go and just ask questions. Be my
yeah,
advice.
sounds like great advice. Well, as I said, I feel like I've learnt loads. So thank you. Really appreciate your time and
My
joining us
pleasure.
today.
My pleasure.